This is Challenging the Narrative, a series that takes a hard look at some of the prevailing mindsets surrounding issues that impact our people of color in Spokane. We examine the facts and the stories behind what has occurred and what needs to be done to shift the narrative in our local community, evolving around civil rights and social justice. Journey with us, talk with us, change with us as we challenge the narratives.
Thank you all for coming tonight, and this is a very important conversation with law enforcement. It's actually something that's been in the works for quite some time, but I also think that timing is everything. And as we are, I believe, 5 days after the 5th anniversary of George Floyd, I think that this is a very timely conversation to have, to really talk about the state of law enforcement here in Spokane. So I'm not going to take up too much more time and turn it over. Is it to Luke or Curtis? Here you go.
Sac passe. Oh, nobody? So when I say sac passe, you say mat boule, right? Mat boule. Sac passe. All right, I'm a first-generation Haitian American. My name is Luke Jasmine. So it's basically a saying that says, "What's up?" and then you say, "What's up back?" It's all good. So I'm Luke Jasmine. I'm a Spokane NAACP EC member and also Ombuds Commission Vice Chair. And happy to be here. And I'll turn it back to Curtis.
Thank you, Brother Luke. And so my name is, and let's give it up for Luke Jasmine and President Lisa Gardner, please. All right, my name is Curtis Robinson. I use he, him pronouns. I identify as multiracial. I am also a NAACP longstanding EC member. And I also, God, what else was I supposed to say about myself? Oh, yeah, I also serve as a commissioner for the Spokane Human Rights Commission for the city. And here with Luke Jasmine, and we're going to be your host tonight for this episode of Challenging the Narrative. And we're doing this in intimate collaboration with two very important offices. We have the Spokane City Human Rights Commission and the Office of the Ombudsman. And so let's give it up for that very important collaboration. As a matter of fact, I think when we're looking at this is the first time this has ever really kind of happened. And of course, I would be so remiss if I did not mention the whole building about what this conversation is around, the critical, important, and powerful collaboration from our Spokane Police Department with our new Spokane Police Chief, Chief Hall. So once again, making history right here in front of you. You're a part of it. And before we get started, though, we want to make sure that we thank all the partners in this work. Of course, the Spokane branch and the executive committee, the production company B&B Pro Video. Those are all the cameras you see around you. Our critical and valued sponsor, Better Health Together, and our very special partners in the work, the Office of the Ombudsman, the City of Spokane Human Rights Commission, the Office of Civil Rights, the Spokane Police Department, and all of our panelists and all of their many varied hats that they're bringing to the table in this conversation. All right? So let's give them up a hand, and I do believe the Office of Civil Rights is in the house. You know how we roll. You make that entrance. Come on, make it on up here. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of slow it down for a minute. Before we get started here, and please let me know, because I kind of am not a fan of holding this thing up to my mouth. It feels kind of weird, but I'm trying to work through it. And, just real talk, I'm a little nervous. Even though I've done these conversations so many times, historic ones, remember back with Sandy Williams, and when we did the conversation at Gonzaga in the theater about criminal justice, and Tony Lodge was there, and everyone. And it was just huge, sponsored by the NAACP. I mean, we have done, and I've done these conversations many times, and it's still sometimes very unnerving. And so sometimes I feel it, sometimes I don't. Right now I'm feeling it. All right, so just sharing that with you. So, getting that off the chest, We also want to make and call special attention and thanks to the Office of Independent Investigations. They are here in the audience. If you would please stand up, let us go ahead and take a minute to acknowledge you. One of the newly stood up results of some of this work over the years, and they are in full motion finally. We're glad you're here, and thank you so much for making the rounds, coming to Spokane, and then being willing to come back here and show up and be in space with us. All right. So also before we get started, let's take some time to emphasize that we are on the land of the Spokanes, and that this has been an intersection for much tribal engagement over the centuries. These peoples are still here today, so we appreciate their stewardship and dedication to holding on to their values, their culture, and community in the midst of hundreds of years of terrible maltreatment in our American society. Also, before we get fully going here, we want to take a few minutes to acknowledge the radical struggle in freeing all of ourselves from white supremacy culture and its mindsets. In this tremendously challenging and often terrifying time we find ourselves in as an American society, under this very tumultuous, destabilizing, and critically dysfunctional administration, we must acknowledge the hurt, pain, and often abject terrorism that is being unleashed on far too many of our Black and brown and our immigrant and our Hispanic human family. I dare say that maybe now, more than ever, that these times are a shining example of how far we have come, yet how far we still have to go. We call for the need to be actively engaged in healing from the inhumanity and toxicity embedded in all of these outcomes of such a system that was originated in and now ruled by white supremacy. We name that such an institution has been in place since the beginning of this country, and we name that all of our shared history, the good and the bad, is American history. Black history, indigenous history, Hispanic history, Asian history, immigration history, all of it. As a branch of the NAACP, we encourage you to become a member and invite you to seek us out for whatever guidance and support you may need to accomplish healing from such things. Thank you, and welcome to another episode of Challenging the Narrative. And with that, Luke, I'm going to pass it off to you to go ahead and introduce the panelists.
Yeah, we'll go. Okay. All right, y'all. I don't know how, but we assembled the all-star panelists group here. I'm really excited to see all of you, and I have the fortune to know all of you and just see all the hard work that you're putting in the community. So just wanted to say thank you for all the hard work that you do. And I'm just buttering you guys up before we ask you the hard questions today. But let me introduce our panelists. First, we're going to start with the Office of Police Ombuds and Commissioner for the CJTC, so that's the Criminal Justice Training Commission of Washington State, Bart Logue. And then, absolutely. And then next to him, we have the founding member of SCAR, Spokane Community Against Racism, pastor of Morningside Baptist Church, former chair, Morningstar, right? Is that what I said? I'm sorry about that. Morningstar Baptist Church, former chair of the Washington State Commission of African American Affairs, and a current commissioner for the CJTC, so that's the Criminal Justice Training Commission of Washington State, Pastor Walter Kendricks. Right next to him, we have a WCPA, so that's the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability Regional member, and an impacted family member of police violence, and it's Jim Lighty. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. we are going to quiz you after this on all the acronyms, just by the way. Next to him, we have a longtime police accountability activist, member of SCAR, and a commissioner of the Spokane Human Rights Commission and War Peace. Chief of the Spokane Police Department and former commander for the Field Services Division of the Tucson Police Department, where he served for 32 years. Prior, with distinction, Spokane Police Chief Kevin Hall. The president of the Spokane NAACP branch and the Spokane City Communications and Community Engagement Director, Lisa Gardner. And last but not least, Director of the Office of Civil Rights, Equity, and Inclusion, and former Spokane Public School Board President and head coach for the Ferris football varsity team. He has the Ferris hat on right now, Jarrell Haynes. Again, thank you all for taking time to be here. Really appreciate you, and I'm going to turn it back to Curtis.
Awesome. Thank you, Luke. And thank you, panelists, and thank you all for your willingness, not in just the great work that you each do as individuals, but also your chosen fields of endeavor, but also your willingness to be here and be on this panel and have this discussion. And as we said, this is groundbreaking. This is historic. And, so your willingness to put yourselves out there like that, not only for what you do in the community, but what you do in your lives, but then to do that extra and come on up here. So I just want to make sure to give an extra thank you for doing that and being those kind of people. One special mention I do want to make is Jim did ask me to do this, and I did kind of miss it. So, Luke, I'm going to hand you that for a second because I've got a lot of papers going on, and I'm going to take this one right here and make sure I hit this key point, Jim, because I caught it. All right. So Jim is a WCPA member, a regional member, and also an impacted family member of police violence, but he also serves as executive director of Citizen 926 and is the police accountability director for SCAR, the Spokane Community Against Racism. Got your box checked. All right, here we go. So if we can go ahead and kick the slides around a little bit and move on to the next one, that would be great. Did the special thanks. So we're going to go ahead and open this thing up. So we're just going to do a little bit of thing. I'm not going to read off all these slides to you. I'm not going to read it, but there's some information. So this stuff, we are live streaming. And we are recording, and so not only is this information getting up there, but as we go ahead and release the recording, we will also release the slide deck. So this will be plenty of information to go ahead and circle back with and, not only kind of double check on, but also inform yourselves on. Because one of the things that we've found about this work more often than not is those of us most impacted and even some of us in this work don't really understand how deep this stuff goes. And so these are just some of the cliff notes that kind of point that out as we continue to set the groundwork for the conversation that we're going to have here tonight. Okay? All right, let's go. So the police force, actually modern policing started in the 1900s. In the South, it also began in the 1700s, but before a formal police system was put into place in the colonies, they were protected by the Night Watch during the 1630s. The history of police in the South differs from other parts of the country because of the prominence of slavery. And the first form of policing in the South was known as the slave patrol. Next slide. In the North, and as more immigrants moved into the cities by the mid-1800s, citizens looked for a more formal way to keep order. So therefore, the first official police force was established in Boston in 1838. And almost all of the police forces were structured similarly throughout time, and their main duty was to prevent crime and keep order. Next. There are currently, at least at the time of the slide, so it might be, about a year old, but didn't really have time to update it to 2025, but it's at least close. So there's over 300,000 police officers currently in the United States. Over 16% of those officers are women, and while about 83% are men, the average age of an employed officer is 39 years old. The most common ethnicity of police officers is white, followed by Hispanic, Latino, Black, or African American, and then the rest unspecified. In 2021, women earned 94% of what men earned in that industry. The U.S. has lost an estimated almost 21,000 police officers in law enforcement in the line of duty in its history. Some have died while fighting storms. Some have been killed in car crashes or helicopter crashes, and some have died trying to defuse bombs in the line of duty. And a significant number in recent times have passed away from heart attacks or other illnesses on the job. Next. Total deaths last year, the year of this, and I believe this was 2023, so it's dating back 2024 and 2023. 123 officers died in the line of duty. I figured that is roughly in line with the previous years, but that is all deaths on the job, including accidents and illnesses. Important to understand is that officers killed in the last 4 years, again, prior to this slide, the data indicated that approximately 40 to 50 officers were shot, stabbed, strangled, beaten, or beaten to death each year. Okay, next. So this was, when I pulled this, sorry, Chief, I didn't look to see if it was updated. I just assumed it was. I assumed this was accurate. So the mission of the Spokane Police Department, the mission, vision, integrity, professionalism, and compassion. Okay, next. So in 2022, police killed more people in that year than any year in the past decade. Next. Black people here in Washington State are almost four times more likely to be killed by police. And then as that far side of the slide points to, at the 1.3% likely as white people to be unarmed. Okay, next. 98% of America's major city police departments kill black people at higher rates than their white counterparts. And there's that slide just indicates that, and you can see how that sets it up as where it is very extreme in some parts of the United States today. Welcome to America. Next. Most killings by police begin with traffic stops, mental health checks, disturbances, nonviolent offenses, and places where there was no crime alleged. Next. 33% of people killed by police were running away, driving away, or otherwise trying to flee. Black and brown people were more likely to be killed while fleeing. And that slide gives you a graphic of that. Next, please. And, I'm sorry, back up, please. Yeah, and you can get all this information. Again, you'll have access to this, and you can look this stuff up for yourselves to verify the information. Trust me, we already have, but please do your footwork. Okay, we invite you to do so. You can find some of this stuff, some of this information at Mapping Police Violence, as well as just Google it. Sometimes that's all it takes. Next. So, yeah, crime rates in the United States have started to decline. It is roughly halved. Halved by 2015, and the exact cause is not known. Research cited by the Brennan Center for Justice found that hiring more police officers helped decrease crime. Okay? In fact, according to that research, up to 10% of the decrease in crime since the 1990s was due to hiring more police. And another theory is that technology used by police, such as their crime tracking system, improved since the 90s, helping them recognize and address trends more effectively. So what we're trying to do and this is the context of this courageous conversation and challenging the narrative, we're trying to talk about the truth. What's really going on? We have to acknowledge that as a society, we have got human beings doing some very radical and dangerous work, and it's having an impact. And there's some other things we're going to talk about too, and some of it you've already seen. Okay, but we're talking about this is a conversation to really start looking at what's going on both sides of the badge. Next slide. Crime rates in the United States have shown a significant decline over the past 2 decades. In 2023, the FBI reported that a decrease in violent crime. So, and it's important to kind of look at this. I won't read this whole slide, but did you hear that? A decrease. I'm telling you here, look it up. But when you listen to the media hype out there, what have you all heard? Increase. It's going off the charts, you know. Da 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 da. Yet the reality is this, and this is what we're here to work on: is how do we challenge those narratives, and what does that look like to come together as a collective human family and really work on this for a minute? And hence my gratitude for these really important and powerful human beings up here on this panel. Okay, next slide. So this is this was put together by the ACLU. This was back in the George Floyd era, which again, of course, is that anniversary that President Gardner mentioned. It's also important to mention too that this is the month that it was just the other week, wasn't it? The 15th, Chief, Police Officer Memorial Day. Okay, so all of this happening and churning at the same time. These are a list of the many names that have been lost to this issue of violence within the law enforcement industry and as a result of. But notice that in this one, we're not listing all the officers. And so I just want to call attention to that too. Conversations on both sides of the badge. Next. This is a picture of a local WCPA member, Debbie Novak, who could not be here today, but is very much aligned with all of the work that we're trying to do. And you will also be able to look this up and get more information about David Novak and the tragedy behind all of that too. Next. So since 2015, police have fatally shot more than 6,300 people, according to the Washington Post database. And in that time, it tracked 91 officers who have been arrested for murder and or manslaughter stemming from an on-duty shooting. That means that police were arrested for murder or manslaughter in a little bit more than 1% of the fatal shootings since 2015. And we've seen some marks in that, but it's also important to understand the context, because what have you all heard in this pushback that came from law enforcement about these changes here in the state? Oh, we can't do our job. Crime's running amok. What else? Anything? How about they're going to arrest, we're going to get arrested, they're coming after us? There it is. Less than 1%. Okay, so again, challenging that narrative. Next slide. So in 2020, the NAACP National had 10 recommendations. I'm not going to go over all of them, but there they are, and including some of the stuff that this panelist is probably going to hit on, some of the key points about that stuff. Next. On the other side of the badge, and I would be extremely humanely remiss if we did not talk about the reality of the cost of our human beings doing this work. Okay? Next. Law enforcement are 54% more likely to die of suicide than any decadence of the usual occupation, and those proportional mortality ratios, that's what PMR stands for. They were the highest for African Americans in that industry, Hispanic males, and then for females. And they were similar, those kind of statistics are similar for detectives as well. So it's kind of like industry-wide. And when we start looking at it, I think there's potential more information coming out now about what it's like for correctional officers. Okay? Similar challenges. Also, one of the biggest challenges to suicide prevention in dealing with this is culture. Okay? If you skim through that slide, that's basically what it breaks down. And so what is that culture, and how do we as a human family start wrapping around the reality of what it's cost these human beings to do a job, okay? And then how do we start really kind of like working on getting our arms, hearts, and minds around the reality that they're not, in so many cases, they're not doing it well. The evidence is already there. You've just seen the snapshots about it. Okay, yet the truth of the matter is some of them are failing because we've set them up to fail. Okay, and how do we start taking collective, not only the culture within the organization, but the legislation around the organization to start having that accountable yet restorative yet accountable approach to this human family that is doing this very dangerous and challenging job. And one of the things I like to say in this work is like, well, you know, no wonder you're acting out. Kind of the same thing I say to my kids sometimes when I'm holding him accountable and he doesn't want to hear it. Okay, and I'm not saying that about these people in there, but I'm saying the response is similar, because you cannot have healthy human development without healthy accountability. It's just that simple. And I think in so many cases, far too many cases, we have seen that manifest with this industry. And so we have a culture to deal with that stems all the way back to how this industry got put in place in the first place. Okay, next slide. As we move through this conversation, we're just gonna have some rules, and basically, for the panelists and the audience, sum it all up, be cool. Okay, it's a tough conversation, very emotional. I'm nervous up here talking to y'all about it, you know, and I'm trying to be cool. Let's just all be cool together. Take space, make space, you know. No fixing, no saving. Let the uncomfortable stuff be there. Turn the hyper judgment into wonder. And understand that accept and expect non-closure, because this is the beginning of the conversation. And this is carrying on a conversation that's been going on a long time. We're not going to solve it all here, but we are going to start it, and I'm sure Commissioner Peace is going to talk about the continuing journey of this conversation in collaboration with so many other, the organizations that have been named here, and of course the NAACP, as much as we can partner in that. And next, bam, and yep, okay. And Luke, is this your speed? Is this you or me? Me? Yeah, the questions are me? Okay, I'll go with that because I kind of got lost in that. All right, so just reviewing for the audience for the panelists here real quick. You've had these questions for more than a minute, so we're going to give you about 2 minutes, and not everybody's going to answer every question, okay? But, you know, we'll just kind of move through it as well as we can. So what are your concerns about community behavior? Okay, what are your concerns about law enforcement behavior? What is your perception of how administration, the mayor's office or city council or the county commissioners or even the office of the presidency as it exists right now is handling both or either of this? We're going to ask you to share about a personal positive experience you've had with law enforcement directly or indirectly, and a personal negative experience you've had about the same industry directly or indirectly. And then to wrap it all up, what do we do? What are we going to do about it? What should we do about it? What do we need to do about it? Okay? And with that, I think we are on. All right, let's do this. Everybody good? All right. Oh, we want to take a minute to go ahead and acknowledge Representative Hill is also in the house. Thank you, Representative Hill. Thank you for making it. Is there any other representatives or city officials that are here that did not get acknowledged? Okay. All right, well, Luke, well, I guess I've got this one, but Luke, why don't you give me a chance to catch my breath, okay, and go ahead and take the first question and then just work your way through and see where we end up.
All right. So this first question, anyone of you can answer, and see there's a mic, or there's several mics here. What are your concerns about community behavior?
Who wants to take that on?
Yeah, that's, I know. Well, I'm gonna go with Chief Hall, because you gave me the biggest face when I asked the question. So.
My biggest concerns with community behavior, boy, that could go in a lot of different directions. I think my biggest concern, or I guess my biggest fear, is apathy. That they just don't want to engage, that they either feel like it's fruitless, or that they're just tired of fighting the fight, whatever that fight may be, or that they just are hopeless. And so I spend a lot of time meeting with a lot of people in this room, to help foster that engagement and to keep it going and to say it's not hopeless. transformation can occur, improvements can occur, particularly where I sit, policing, better policing is what people want, and that can occur. It cannot occur if the community doesn't engage. And so that would be my biggest fear and why I work so hard trying to engage with the community, because I need them to be a partner. And I will bend over backwards to be as good of a partner as I possibly can, particularly with Spokane community. But I can't do it alone.
Appreciate that. Anyone else? What are the concerns? What are your concerns about community behavior?
So I guess when it comes to law enforcement,
Swap you out. Okay. Yep.
That one was on.
Is this the bad one? Okay.
so as far as law enforcement and the community, one of the things that's really missing is the fact that we forgot what George Floyd meant to this community, right? We all went in these streets and declared that type of policing we did not want. And in the time since then, where has the community been? Because since George Floyd, we went from being the 5th deadliest police force to being the 3rd deadliest police force. And what that means to our community is that since 1994 till now, we've had about 62 people, community members, be killed by law enforcement here in Spokane. That averages out about 2 police killings a year for 31 years. We as a community rose up, made lots of great signs, but we did not go forward with the reforms that we all wanted during the George Floyd era. And so my concerns with the community is right now, we, us activists, have been pushing for legislation to make changes in police. And what we're being told by legislatures is until the community really activates on this topic, legislatures aren't willing to go forward with changing any laws. So my plea for the Spokane community is get involved. Start talking to your city council members about how to make our police force better. And there are active ways, and I want to give kudos to Chief Hall for coming into our city and making changes. But we really need to have a community conversation about what it means to have a city be the 3rd deadliest police force in this country. And the fact that that means that we have grieving family members that are here demanding change.
Thank you for that. Anyone else want to take that question?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've noticed with our community as a whole is we see a big division in our community. We can see it at protests, one side versus another side. And we see a lack of empathy going around. I work with a lot of families who have lost loved ones for various reasons. And the things that you see people say on social media because they're hidden behind a screen are atrocious. We don't think about what if that was my child? What if that was my parent? What if that was my brother, my sister? We just say these things and we cause more hurt. And so as a community, I see a lot of people that are angry, a lot of people that are frustrated. They don't know who to turn to, and that they just get very vocal about these things and don't always put consideration into the people that they're talking about.
Appreciate that. We're going to move to the next question here, which is, what are your concerns about law enforcement behavior? What are your concerns about law enforcement behavior?
one of the concerns I have about law enforcement behavior is definitely the culture that we have seen in law enforcement and the transparency. There is a feeling of us versus them when you see law enforcement who have done certain things. Let's take officer-involved shootings, for instance. And every single officer-involved shooting in the history of Spokane has been deemed justified, and we move on. But we don't look at those officers' actions and say, in the eyes of the law, were they justified? Maybe, but were they morally right? What can we do to stop this from happening? Because we're seeing unarmed, innocent people being shot and killed, but we're not seeing changes in that behavior. In some instances, we've seen awards handed out to some of the officers. In the latest one where an award was handed out to 4 officers, 2 of the officers had been involved in officer-involved shootings. One of them, this was their 2nd shooting. The other one was their 3rd shooting. In an industry, in an occupation where drawing your gun should be rare and firing it should be even rarer.
Thank you for that. Mr. Logue?
All right. Am I on? Yep. Okay. That's a tough question. I work in police oversight, and oftentimes all we get to see are the complaints and the community impact cases and things like that. And when those are the things that you see 100% of the time, it gives you the idea that that's what's going on 100% of the time. And in reality, we're missing out on an awful lot of data that's actually happening most of the time. But if I was to say concerns about law enforcement, I made way too many notes. And I'm concerned about how they respond to disrespect, which may be aimed towards them. And as I watch them go to scene after scene after scene after scene, I think sometimes there's I need to solve this in 5 seconds or less. And they don't take the time sometimes to really understand what's happening or give the person a chance to express what is going on in their mind. And I really think that adding time is just so critical in how they respond, and just trying to slow things down and make sure there's good communication. Because if there's angst from the community already in regards to the law enforcement officers that might be showing up, and there's angst from the law enforcement side of things about what they might be responding to, and every time it's well, there could be a gun, there could be a knife, they're anticipating things which may or may not be accurate, it can raise the level of concern and just how they respond. And then what that translates into is a disrespect. They didn't hear me, they didn't care about me, they didn't take the time to approach my need, and that just alienates me even further from trying to bring the community and law enforcement together. So I think there's a growing disrespect, both from the community side, if I would have talked about the community, and there's an anger in how they interact with the officers right in front of them, which is dangerous. I think in society right now, as we have discourse with each other, we talk at each other a lot. We don't talk to each other very much. We want to be right every single time. And in those interactions where there's high stress and there's dangerous things happening and a great amount of unknown, talking at people can be really dangerous, and that elevates the concern and potential uses of force out there. So I think our ability to communicate with respect is probably the thing I care about the most, because I think it's the basis of everything right now.
Thank you for that. And Chief Hall, I want to go to you with that question because, I mean, you have a tough job, right? You're listening to community, you're trying to be responsive to community, but then you're leading a bunch of folks who are, putting their lives at risk. So, from your perspective, what are your concerns about the current law enforcement behavior?
I think everything that's been mentioned here are valid concerns and concerns that I have as well. What Bart mentioned is probably among the greatest. Is we spend 21 weeks with sometimes officers as young as 21, teaching them how to be police officers. In Spokane, we give them another 5 weeks after the basic academy, and then we throw them out there and expect them to make these life-altering decisions in a split second. And I think it was Marcus who said earlier that, or I'm sorry, Curtis, that said earlier that we're setting them up to fail. And in some cases, I think we are, because 21 years old is very young to be making these kind of decisions, and 21 weeks is not a whole lot of time to try and get these people to a place where they can make these decisions. So I worry about that constantly. But going back to what Part said about time, slowing things down, and using critical decision-making skills, the officers often don't think about the reason why a person isn't complying. And sometimes compliance is seen as a threat when in fact it could be a hearing disability, it could be a language issue, it could be a person in behavioral health crisis. So just slowing down and understanding what you're seeing and using your critical decision-making skills are what we're emphasizing now. And I think using that to slow things down and understanding, and I sat on this very stage probably 9.5 months ago, and I mentioned something called the danger imperative. We teach officers, and I take responsibility for this. I've been doing this for 33 years now. We teach them that there's a threat around every corner, that every person could possibly or potentially hurt them. We drive that into them, and over and over and over, and we've got to figure out how to unlearn that.
Thank you for that. Pastor Kendricks, we'll end this question with you. I mean, you've seen it from all levels as far as being, I know, hey, look, this is why y'all came. You've been chairs of committees. You've helped pass policy. You obviously are a huge community leader. So from your perspective, what are your concerns about law enforcement behavior?
I'm thinking, and it's a, thanks for having me, by the way. Thank you all for being here too, by the way. It's a profession that I would not want to be involved in. I do have concerns, and Chief Hall, have a lot of respect for Chief Hall. He just touched on it. We can't expect our police to not engage, and it's not all of them, some of them, to not engage in some of the behaviors that they do when it is constantly hammered at them that there's danger around every corner. I mean, what other result would you expect? There's a thing, and I know I'm living, people say it's a pipe dream, but SCAR, and one member of SCAR in particular, coined a phrase, and the phrase is subjugation of personhood. And in dealing both ways, from the community's viewpoint and from the police viewpoint, I would suggest we have to figure out a way to make it known that these are human beings that you are dealing with. They have families. They have children. They have good days. They have bad days. And it's like I think Jim mentioned, we don't have the empathy for people anymore. It's like and again, I'm speaking from a pastoral as I work this, because I see things differently. It's like, these are human beings that we're dealing with here. They're not garbage. They're not trash. And I'm talking about from the community's eyes looking at police officers and from police officers looking at community members. They're human beings, and if we could somehow get there, but I don't know, it seems as though that's not what we want. What we want is what we have right now. I'm a tough guy, you know, and that's not the way, I don't think policing should be done. And I think a part of it is, and I'm finished, I think a part of it is we've made people afraid of one another. And that's not, you know, if a police officer, Chief Hall, if a police officer is responding to a call, I know that they don't know what they're gonna encounter. And we gotta be honest, there are some people out on the street that don't need to be out there. There's some bad people out there. But for the most part, that's not what we see. So that's what concerns me. It's like we just don't care about one another anymore.
Appreciate that. Okay, listen, I didn't write these questions, okay? But I'm going to go to you, Jarrell, and Lisa next for our next question, which is, what is your perception of how administration, so that's the mayor's office, city council, county commissioners, and the president's office, is handling both or either? And I mean, you know, you both are in local government, so yeah. What is your perception on how administration, so mayor's office, city council, county commissioners, or the president's office is handling both or either?
You won't have a job tomorrow.
I knew I should have answered one of the other two questions. When I didn't answer one of those, I said to Lisa, I said, he's coming to us next, watch. Set up, bad.
I got your back.
Man, you know, I've now been at the city through 2 administrations now, through 2 police chiefs now. I've thoroughly enjoyed getting to know Chief Hall, and I hope we continue to build on a positive relationship. What I would say, my perception of how I'll talk about, right, the mayor's office and a little bit of city council, even though I'm not in city council's office, we work together a lot, and I have the utmost respect for Council President Wilkerson and a number of our city council members. What I would say is that there's a lot of hunger and urgency in trying to get this right now, today, right? I think there's a commitment to cleaning up the data, which Chief Hall and both Mr. Logue have talked about multiple times, right? The data that we have isn't sufficient, and so how do we fix that? How do we clean up that data so that we can be better informed about what actions need to take place? I think that we have a lot of systems thinkers in leadership right now that understand the reality of the things that we see perpetuated in community in relation to police practices or police conduct are symptoms of much larger issues at play, and that all of the solutions don't lie at the feet of the police department, they don't lie at the feet of the administration or city council, that none of these issues came about on their own, and we need to explore solutions that bridge those gaps and that tie a lot of different industries, public entities, private entities together around solutions, whether it involves education. I know Chief Hall is a huge proponent of early learning, so am I, so is a lot of people here. Home ownership, you know, economic opportunities. One of the more recent moves in bringing back neighborhood resource officers, I think, is a brilliant move and a brilliant idea that at least help us get started and prevent us from doing that othering that we heard mentioned so many times here already today. When we can get police officers to be connected to the communities that they're policing, I think that helps eliminate that, you know, that invisible wall that exists, right? One of the things that we learned years ago was that a number of our police officers don't live within the city of Spokane, right? And just by nature, that makes it easier to other people while you're on the job, right? Because technically, this isn't your home. Technically, this isn't your neighborhood that you're policing. This isn't your streets. These are not your neighbors. These kids are not the kids that your kids engage with on a day-to-day basis. It just becomes human nature to kind of other people, so to speak, right? Like, I don't consider Cheney my people or my home, right? Because I live in Spokane, right? I work in Spokane. I engage with the community and residents of Spokane, and so these are my people, right? And I think it becomes just abundantly easier and more clear when we can have police officers living in our city, working in our city, calling certain neighborhoods home that they're also policing and building relationships in. And so my perception is that I think things have a potential to head in the right direction. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of brilliant people with the right heart for this work in the right positions, whether it's council president in her position, whether it's the mayor in hers, the chief in his, Bart in his, Lisa in hers as the president. That was the president I thought you were talking about on on the question. Yeah.
One could hope.
Yeah. Well, yeah. One can hope, right? You know, and there's, and as a result of that leadership all being in place at the same time, I think there's some pretty cool conversations happening around regional solutions, reimagining not only law enforcement, but what incarceration looks like, what those processes look like, what those buildings look like, how we better serve our community members that may have found themselves on the other side of the law, unfortunately. How do we better serve those people? How do we get people processed through the legal system faster than what happens? I don't think anybody should be in jail a year awaiting trial, right? But that goes to speak to the system again. I think one of the things that currently exists is our police officers are given the benefit of the doubt automatically, and community members are on the complete opposite end of that spectrum, not only in how they're approached, but how they're treated throughout the criminal justice system.
I love how y'all, gasp when I call on you to answer a question, and y'all give the most thoughtful answers to them. So, President Gardner.
Ditto. In all seriousness, from a council's perspective, I live in the world of being neutral, and because I'm doing the communications, but I believe that the intention of council is to always provide the resources for public safety in general. And I believe that looking at it from a humanistic perspective is how do we not only keep our officers safe, but how do we keep our community safe? So I think that there's a lot of consideration when it's coming from a council perspective, and that's all I'm going to say on that. From a national perspective, I will be honest in that I worry. I definitely worry about what the future looks like in the next couple of years, because we saw something that I know in my lifetime I've never seen, and I'm sure many of you have never seen with January 6th. And to know that a lot of them have been pardoned for those actions is, what does that look like for the future? And what does that look like for now state law enforcement, regional law enforcement, and even city law enforcement, because now they're feeling emboldened by this action. So I believe that it's definitely concerning, and that we really need to keep an eye open to not only what's happening locally, but regionally in our state and our country.
Thank you for that answer, President Gardner. I'm going to kick it to Curtis to chime in.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Luke. Thank you so much, and thank you all for some very thoughtful, as Luke was pointing to, some very thoughtful and intentional responses, right? And also just pointing to the fact that it's kind of why we gave you this for a minute, so you could, it's sort of like, ta-da, answer the question. Not trying to do that, right? So we're trying to just have some real talk about what the heck is going on, so that we can have some intentionality and some mindfulness about what the narratives are and how do we challenge them in a way that hopefully gets us somewhere different than where we are today, right? And so with that, I want to go ahead and just move right to something, and we've got about another half an hour to kick conversation around a little bit before we start moving into closeout. And so I was trying to catch some themes, right? So I heard, and I'm just going to take a minute and name it. I heard trauma, right? I heard dehumanizing. I heard otherizing. I heard fear, fear-mongering, right? I heard hypervigilance. I heard humanity. And so, just kind of like trying to pick out some of those things, and I also heard very, very clearly the tacit suffering and loss of life on all sides of this thing. And so, and that was just coming out of your all's mouths, and that's only just those questions so far. So let's go ahead and dig in a little bit more. What about, and you all have already kind of hit on this, and so I'm just going to kind of name that you've been hitting some of these themes now for a minute, and just taking a minute to name that. And you've also kind of started hitting on what needs to be done in either group, but as we start moving through this next half an hour, and as we're getting ready to kind of like present what some of the options might be, what some of the solutions are, I wanted to kind of start pointing you in that direction a little bit and flag that for you, even though you've hit on some of that stuff. But so let's start sharing about experiences. So what about a personal positive experience that you've had with law enforcement directly or indirectly?
I'll kick this off.
All right, come on, Lisa. Come on, Press.
This was shortly after Breonna Taylor. So I am a single woman, black woman, and I want to acknowledge that I am the only woman on this panel, and I'm the only black woman on this panel.
Yep.
But even more so, there aren't, and I don't know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, any black women on the Spokane Police Department or women of color. And so we always talk about wanting to and needing to have a police community that reflects the community. And so my experience was I was at my apartment and I hear this boom, 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 boom at the door. And I was on a Zoom call. And I live in an apartment community that it could be kids, it could be, whatever the case may be. And I look out the peephole and it's the police. And I immediately start shaking. I'm scared. Not that I'm doing anything wrong, but again, this is after Breonna Taylor. And I opened the door, and he could see that I'm shaking. And I'm like, I don't even say anything. I just opened the door. And he said, well, we received complaints of domestic violence. And I said, I'm here by myself. And he questioned, he's like, are you sure? I said, I'm positive. I'm on a Zoom call, so maybe the voices that you hear is a Zoom call. But I'm here by myself. There's no domestic violence going on here. And come to find out, he was at the wrong building. He's like, oh, I was supposed to be at the E building. I'm at the F building. And I said, okay. And he's like, I'm so sorry that you are, he's like, I see that you are shaken. And I very much am. He's like, he was very apologetic. But imagine if this could have gone another way. And to me, that reinforced my fear with law enforcement. And it shouldn't be that. There shouldn't be a fear as a woman, as a black woman, to answer the door to who was supposed to be public safety, to protect and serve. Instead, I feared for my life. And that, to me, is a little bit of the negative, but also of the positive, that he definitely saw that I was shaken by this interaction with him. And granted, he's doing his job if he's responding to a domestic disturbance, and definitely pressing to make sure that I wasn't hiding anything or I wasn't covering for anyone, but also, too, realizing that we're living in a time where constant reinforcement of the reason why we don't trust law enforcement. And I want to get away from that, but how do we get away from that to where communities of color can now trust public safety and law enforcement?
Lisa, thank you so much. And I really just, I'm going to take a minute to start kind of like pinning some things out and some themes, right? So that initial reaction. So I'm a justice-involved person. I did my time 1984 through 1987 for a strong-arm robbery that I committed while I was crack cocaine addicted and gunshot wounded. I have been clean and sober for over 20 years. I have a huge resume of all the stuff that I do, including in and out of the presidency of the NAACP, and I still get shook up by law enforcement, right? And as community, as we're having this conversation and trying to figure out where do we go from here, we have to understand that's at play. We might have done nothing wrong, just being us, and it's just the fact that that authority figure is showing up with a gun and a taser and maybe some backup, and that's just that instantaneous reaction, and especially with the the ethnic history and the gender dynamics and just all that stuff. So I really appreciate you taking a minute to name that even in that positive experience, that other stuff is still there, right? Let's keep going. Come on, let's share about another positive one.
We've had, whoa, hello.
Hi, Jim.
Sorry, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning. We've had many protests that have taken place, and looking at through the years of the various protests, they don't always go very well. Interactions with law enforcement have been not pleasant. Over the course of this year so far, I have been the police liaison on a few protests, and wasn't quite sure what I was getting into and how it was going to go. I met with Chief Hall, and we talked about communicating and what the officers are going to do during the protest and how to work with them. And we ended up having some protests that went very smoothly, and working with the officers were very professional. And we had even one point where one of the people that was in the protest had a chase vehicle where the battery died, and they pulled up, helped jumpstart the vehicle and get the protest going with us. So it's been a nice change seeing how that has come about lately.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. And it's okay to clap, right? It's okay to clap about this kind of stuff because, again, we are dealing with a human family that's doing a huge job on the other side of the badge under some of the circumstances we've already heard named out and continue to kind of like educate human family on. And we also know that you're carrying a gun. And so there's this, this constant dance about how do we figure out what this really is and figure out a way to do better, including acknowledging the importance and the service and the people that do this job well and how much they are appreciated. And that does have an impact, even though sometimes it's also having an impact differently, happening simultaneously, okay? Next one, let's hear another one.
So I want to give some kudos actually to officers. I work as a homeless service provider, specifically downtown. And this past winter, I had a few experiences working downtown where officers actually flagged me down, asked me and my team to go check on a 62-year-old elderly person that was underneath a bridge. And so we were able to get resources, get them into a shelter and whatnot. And I will say that in years past, that kind of partnership would not have taken place. And so I just really want to acknowledge how honored we are to have Chief Hall and his change of philosophy here, because we are actually seeing a difference on the streets. And so I just, I could name those officers by offhand, but I'm sure I'll probably embarrass them. But they are some remarkable folks out there that are working these streets with our homeless community. And so I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just want to also take a special note. So I've been hanging out with this brother for more than a minute, and I can honestly tell you that's one of definitely under a handful of times and probably under 4 fingers on that one hand where he has said something authentically positive about his experience with law enforcement in this community, because he's been so zeroed in on so much of the other stuff that has been very prevalent, right? So thank you for being vulnerable like that, Brother Peace, and all of you for being vulnerable and sharing about your real experiences, right? Because we got to look at both sides of the badge, what's really going on, How are we going to figure out where to go if we don't see as many sides of this as we possibly can? We took 3, and, let's go ahead and switch gears a little bit. Okay, so y'all are accountability in that zone for a reason. So let's hear what's going on. So let's talk about some of the negative stuff you've either witnessed personally, directly, or indirectly. Be you, do you. And sorry, one key point. I keep trying to make it there. I just want to acknowledge that City Council was also in the room. Kitty. I always mess up that last name. Klitsky. So if you're still in the room, hi, love you. If you've left, sorry, miss you, but we acknowledge you. Thank you for showing up for the time that you did. All right.
Yeah, in 2017, my buddy Craig Johnson was killed by police, and he was the best man at my wedding. He was an uncle to my children. It hit me very hard, and it changed my life. It changed my family's life. And I started working with a lot of other families who had suffered the same experience. And it's hard to relay to other people what it's like. Most people can imagine, but it's something that, this is 8 years later, and there's times where I'll get choked up over it, and it shakes you. So going forward with that, in the beginning, I was very angry, and it's taken a long time for me to start coming back around and trusting law enforcement to sit down with the chief of police and talk with them about making things better. We still have a ways to go. I do a lot of public records requests as part of Citizen 926. We help people get public records, and transparency is an issue. And when we were looking at police reports and looking at how things are worded, that's one of the things that strikes me. And I started thinking about my buddy Craig, who was killed. And when he was killed, the police report just didn't match up with what took place. And I see that happen often, where the police reports that we're seeing do not match up. And we do not see the empathy coming from law enforcement towards those families, even in cases where we know for a fact that the person that was killed hadn't committed a crime and was unarmed. There's no apology. And those families suffer. They don't get to benefit from the victims fund, because the police reports, then when they do the investigation, they put out there that the person was involved in a crime, and they weren't. They were just in the wrong place. So they just keep getting hurt time after time again.
Yeah. And thank you for that, Jim, and thank you for sharing of your, that thing that I know motivated you right into this work. And so, just to take a minute and acknowledge the personal cost that each person, from where they're coming from, everybody from Jarrell to Lisa to Chief Hall to Anwar to Jim to Walter to Bart, have personal experience on numerous aspects of this, and it costs them something to come up here and talk about it, like we just saw. We've already seen it all night, but we just saw it with Jim too as well. We're going to see some more of that.
Well, I think my job, it's inherently full of conflict with police. And just in general, oversight of law enforcement is not the rosy retirement gig I thought I was getting into. And I think system-wise, I'm really concerned with how police seem to fear accountability. And accountability doesn't necessarily mean you're fired. You can't be a police officer again. I sit on a lot of decertification panels for the CJTC, and those officers who end up before those panels definitely deserve to be before those panels. So folks, accountability is about performance improvement. It's making sure you don't stray too far to the left or too far to the right in how you're doing your job. It's making sure that you can have a 35-year career and retire and go home and enjoy your grandparents, et cetera, et cetera. That's a good accountability system. And when we want to put in things which lessen liability for officers, keep officers potentially safer by using less force, they could be even more safe, I believe, but also greatly impact our community at the same time. There's this angst that just comes up. And I haven't been run out of town yet, but they've really tried many, many times. And a number of times in commission meetings, I've had to say, if I'm not strong enough to stand up and say what I believe, you need somebody else to do this job. So it's facing them eyeball to eyeball sometimes and still saying it, even if you know the reaction is going to be wrong. Using less force, keeping officers out of criminal and civil liability. That's good moral high ground. If you don't do an action that might find yourself in court, that's good. That means if we have to eliminate this space in the middle, maybe we don't use that tactic. We got rid of the LVNR in Washington State. Thankfully, that was a state reform effort. But that's going to keep officers from being criminally or civilly charged, at least in this state. Because in Washington, it is becoming easier to charge an officer with some sort of action based on the performance of their duties. And we want to avoid that. An officer going up for charges is not helpful to us. It's not helpful to them. It's definitely not helpful for our community. Mapping police violence, we talked about it very early on. When that first came out and we were number 5, some law enforcement officials came out and they talked about the math. Oh, it's bad math. All I care about is not being on that list. I don't care what the math is. Let's get off that list. However the math we got there, Spokane it doesn't seem to me like the most violent city in America. And we've been as high as number 2 since I've been here. And that's troubling. But when you talk about reform, or when you talk to any police officer that really hasn't interacted with me at all, there's this negative, Bart's the devil kind of approach to any sort of oversight, to any sort of accountability, and that is across the board. And it wasn't until Chief Hall came in and changed a couple of thought processes, and I don't know exactly what he did, and he hasn't told me yet, but all of a sudden, some other senior executives feel free to call me and ask my opinion on things. That didn't happen in the previous 9 years. That's a culture change, and that's influence at the top that can really start to push down. And that's really positive, and I thank you, Chief.
Yeah, let's clap for that one. Come on. That was huge. And as we're getting ready to pivot,
just one thing real quick, Curtis.
Yes, sir.
And maybe I'm living in a, I don't know, not on Earth or whatever. But our, at least in my opinion, our understanding of and our expectations of what we want our police to do. What is it that you want them to do, and then how is it that they do what it is you want them to do? Our understanding of crime, fear, I think it's more so fear. We are actually afraid of one another. And we live in these, and it's kind of comical, we live in these silos where anything that's different from what I'm used to, it has to be negative. And it just doesn't make sense to me. And I come back to the same thing, and then I'm done. It's like, why do we treat one another the way we do? what's driving that? And again, I don't have the answers, but I'm searching for them diligently. And it's like, because we're all members of the same family. Really, we all come from the same place. We just look different. And those differences, somehow they've become negative, and they're not negative, they're positive, because if you're learning something from someone who's different from you, they're making you better, and you make them better. If we acknowledge that. So I just had to get that out. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And thank you both. So let's give let's give everybody a hand real quick. I just want to take a minute and just kind of pause. And again, we're trying to make this some as much of an interactive as we can, and to also like get some of the truth and information out into the ecosphere of our human consciousness. Here's what's really going on from all sides of this, and we'll take some questions. So I just want to flagging you back to Amy. If you would go ahead and raise your hand there. She's got some scraps of paper. She's going to just kind of walk around through the room if you'd like a scrap of paper and want to write on it. She's got some little pencils there too. So please, we want to hear your questions and go ahead and put them before the panel, okay? So whatever you got, just wanted to go ahead and flag that, and Amy's going to be walking around as we continue this conversation, okay? Sound good. All right, let's hear from one more. And, Walter, I'm going to back you up for a minute. So one of the things that people may not know, even though, sometimes this is the audience of the choir, I'm not going to assume everybody knows that. Walter, how did SCAR start? You got like a death grip on it.
How did SCAR start? SCAR started out of outrage, anger. There was an altercation in East Central. A young black man got killed, shot in the back 3 times, got shot at 3 times, got hit twice. An all-white jury, and I hadn't been here long in Spokane, and I was trying to figure out, how do you have an all-white jury? Easy, it's Spokane. And they said he was not guilty. And to add outrage to that, I'm not an attorney, but the person who committed, and it was murder, it just was, it was murder that killed Poindexter. The state, you, me, taxpayers, we paid for his defense. He didn't have any legal fees because he pled not guilty. So out of outrage, Sandy and it's like, nah, we can't let this go by. So we put out the call. Morning Star, the church where I'm pastor, was packed, and that's how SCAR started. And Sandy, which I didn't know it at that point in time, it was SCAR, and she borrowed it, Spokane Community Against Racism. Well, years prior, here in Spokane, SCAR had a different understanding. It was Spokane Churches Against Racism. And I thought that's part of Sandy's brilliance. Anyway, answering the question, that's how SCAR got started, just out of outrage. It's like, no, when I was a kid, and I'm dating myself 30 seconds.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, you get shot in the back on the Westerns, John Wayne and that type thing. That's a bushwhacker, dry gulcher. And you mean to tell me that a man is going to be killed from 30 feet away? 30, you know how far 30 feet is? 30 feet away, and he's shot in the back, and then people can come together and say not guilty? So that's how.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And there's a reason for bringing that up, and and you're gonna hopefully, again, this is not the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of it. What I also want to flag real quick too is that as Amy has passed some of those out, if you would raise your hand When you're done writing your questions, she'll also come back by and pick them up, okay? All right, very good. So we're going to start moving into, we've got a little bit more left on this time thing here. We're going to be done about 7:30. Looks like we'll just kind of work with it that way. But let's start moving into, some action points. What can we do? We've laid enough of the context to understand. Look, let's just be real about it. SCAR started not because things were all hunky and dory in Spokane and Washington and and in the United States. It started because we have some issues. We have some racial issues here. And running around pretending like they're not happening is not solving it. And then turning around and empowering an aspect of our human family to deal with the problems that we're having as a human society and not training them on and in depth about expectations as far as being culturally aware and how to deal with the embedded conscious and unconscious racism in this country is not working well. Okay, and we just have to just be honest about that. And then how do we now start coming together as a collective and figuring out where do we go from here? With just a little bit we've unpacked. Okay, what do we do with that? So we're gonna kick it around to the panelists a little bit more to talk about some of their ideas about some of the things that we need to do besides having, Spokane Community Against Racism, the Spokane NAACP, the Washington Coalition for Police Accountability, the Ombudsman's Office, the Office for Independent Investigations, the Criminal Justice Training Commission Office, the Spokane Human Rights Commission. We've got all that already, and we're still here. So what do we do now? Where do we go from here? I'm going to kick it over to Luke, because Luke is going to walk us through this last piece of the conversation and then also open it up for questions from the panelists as this little section closes out and we move to those questions you're bringing in. So where do we go from here? What needs to be done? Have at thee.
And we'll start with you.
Death grip on the mic.
Well, what needs to be done, as far as what I believe, we really need to acknowledge that we do have a public safety issue in our community. And the fact that we have not been spending adequate resources on that has gotten us into many different predicaments. So the aspect of this police force and what we're asking this police force to do, it is one of the smallest police forces I've seen for this a city this size. 340 officers. Of that, 175 of them are patrol officers. Tacoma is the third biggest city in the state. They have about 700 officers. Seattle has 14 officers, or 1,400 officers. And so the fact that we have so little officers and we're asking them to do so much creates stress, in my opinion, and the fact that they have, in the previous administration, they were on forced overtime. And so that's gotten us to a place where we are the third deadliest police force, and we have no signs of letting up anytime soon. So what I would like to see is for us to really get into why we're that way and try to develop ways where we aren't. One of the things I was blessed to do on the 18th of April was be a part of a police demo training at their academy where they have a shooting simulator. Going through that simulator was very telling because what I learned there was that that simulator needs to be used more, and especially used more with officers that have repeatedly used force, deadly force in our community. And so we really need to study this epidemic. And so I really would like to see academics come into our community and really take a look at the data and be a third party that can look at this, because right now there is a dysfunction, and I cherish Chief Hall dearly, and I'm very confident of his leadership, but I don't think his leadership alone will get us out of this problem of being on this list. And we don't like being on the 5th worst pothole city list. We don't like that one. We do everything in our city to try to resolve that one. So why aren't we spending more energy studying that?
Thank you for that. Anyone else? What do we believe needs to be done in order? There you go.
Yeah, I think part of it is the warrior culture, and I know that is something that's being worked on in Spokane. Spokane County, I don't know so much. It wasn't that long ago that Sheriff Knezevich was trying to bring David Grossman to Spokane to teach about killology. And just prior to that, David Grossman went to Coeur d'Alene. And when we found out about it, my dear wife said, "Ooh, you should go check that out." So I drove over there and sat through his classes, and it was disgusting. People like David Grossman should not be training police officers. We should not be training police officers that they're warriors, that they're out here patrolling the streets looking for the enemy when we're the community. We are not the enemy. We all live here. We're all neighbors, and we need to interact with each other more. So part of it is getting away from that training, looking at more mental health training, crisis intervention training, de-escalation. When I look at these officer-involved shootings, a lot of the times that I'm seeing is that things were rushed. There wasn't time, distance, communication, cover. It just goes so fast, and that's one of the things we need to do is slow down and look at de-escalation. I think we can get there, but we also need to interact more with each other on just a regular basis, not just because we have to do it professionally.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else want to take that question before I go to?
Yeah, sure. Whatever. Well, I mean, the list is long and wide. I think that this whole conversation is aptly named, right? Challenging the narrative, because I think narratives need to change dramatically, right? Perceptions, how people speak and view things is important, and we have to be honest, right? And Spokane has a culture of violence, and I'm not just talking about the police department, right? Spokane as a city, a community, and a region has a history and a culture of violence, and we have to be honest about that. Years ago when I was on the school board, I was made privy, I'm not gonna name school districts or anything, but there's a local school district that actually had purchased weapons for their resource officers within their school buildings for them to carry in their effort to police the schools, right? And that was seen, viewed as a phenomenal idea to better help those officers serve those students, those children, those babies, right? And so many people had to be on board for that conversation to even make it past the point of checks getting signed and purchases happening and receiving the deliverables, right? So as a community, we have to have real honest conversations about where we are in our perception of violence and or our acceptance of violence based on certain conditions that may or may not exist. Another thing is, and this is a perception, of course, because I'm not a part of the police department, but I know that there's a widely held perception of all police departments of a monolith existing, right? In terms of there are not enough police officers that speak up and out publicly when they know things are wrong. There just aren't. And I've heard a number of reasons why that happens, and it makes it understandable, right? I've heard people afraid of severe retaliation that results in death even, right? I don't know how true or not that is, but that perception exists, right? And whenever, almost regardless of the situation, you have entire police departments always standing behind potentially nefarious activities or acts, that does not feel good for anybody else who at least views themselves as a potential victim on the other side of those outcomes. And I think that further drives that wedge and divide, and it gets our police departments further and further away from what could be real accountability. And the truth is, police departments and police unions wield a lot of power, not only in the form of policing, but in the form of elections. And so when you can almost single-handedly in some communities impact the outcomes of elected leaders' livelihoods, right? That's a lot of influence that no one group or organization should realistically have, right? Now, granted, there's probably not a whole lot we could do about that until we actually start recruiting, hiring, and retaining more diverse police force as well, right? Me and Chief Hall have had conversations about that. They have revolving job openings, right? And so we're a small police department for the size of the city that we have, and we have openings, right? Like, so we're not even able to fill the staffing positions that we have, that city council has allocated funding for, right? And so how do we start as a community wrapping our arms around the hiring practices within our police department and supporting them with the recruitment of qualified, quality individuals that honestly want to do their part towards moving the work forward. And then, of course, there's a whole list of other things. But
Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to transition to questions from the audience. First, can we give a hand for Commissioner Amy McCullum, real quick? So she went around, passed these. You all wrote on these, and then I attempted to read them. So we're going to take an executive turn, and I'm actually going to come out to you all. Now, we're going to do an honor system. Okay, I don't want what you wrote to go in vain. So, if you did write on one of these, I want to come to you first so that you could ask your question to the panelists. Okay, so I'm going to come into the crowd, and you're going to ask your question. I believe over here. Did you have a question? All right.
More than a question, it's a component of what each of you has said. How do we change? And then there are words after that. What I added to that is, how do we change 400 plus years of power over language? You know, your 21-year-old police officer had 21 years of crap that we've all been taught to use when we're thinking about ourselves and everyone else. So if we're going to change any of this stuff, we got to start reframing all of it, right? So my question that I asked Chief when you were being interviewed, can we first change law enforcement officers to peace officers?
Well, the short answer is I don't know. The longer answer is I want to try, and that's why I could have retired easily, but I didn't want to. I feel like I still have things to give to the community, and I want to see policing move forward, and I believe that collectively we can do that. You know, when I began, I meant it. I'm not going to be able to do it alone. And you know, to the credit of my leadership team, I'm very much a breadcrumb kind of guy. I'll lay out the breadcrumbs. They're either going to follow it or they're not. And so far, they're following the breadcrumbs. And I'm going to continue to do that. If there was one thing in Kevin Hall's ideal world that I would have every single police officer in this country go through, they would go to Montgomery, Alabama, and they would go through the Legacy Museum and the Lynching Museum. Probably one of the most impactful things I've ever been to. And it recognizes and brings awareness to what you just described. 400 years of a power dynamic that is systemic. And when I've had these conversations with officers who are like, I don't understand what systemic racism is. And then you start talking about things like that. And the institutions that uphold that. It doesn't mean the individual officers are racist. What it means is that the society has built structures to allow these things to happen. So Little Chief Hall in Spokane, Washington is not going to change that. But I can do my part with the Spokane Police Department to move the needle.
All right, we're going to go to the next question here.
So my question is a good follow-up to what Charles framed, I think, because even with all of the positive starts, and much credit to you, Chief Hall, I feel very encouraged. I too have noticed the change in the attitude of rallies and being in public events downtown. There's no armored vehicles off to the side. There's no helicopters or drones flying low. The law enforcement officers, the peace officers were on bicycles and very helpful about reminding people to stay safe by staying within lines. I mean, just a huge difference. But in thinking about community, because we are all interconnected and related and neighbors and people, human beings, how do any of you see the most essential components for building healthier, more humane community?
One of the things that I see is getting out, being around each other, spending more time with each other, learning about each other, seeing each other, seeing you more than just them, or whatever. Is seeing people as people, getting to know each other and realizing that they love, they cry, they hurt, they have families, they care. And I think that's one of the things that we need to do all around. Doesn't matter what your profession is or where you live. Doesn't matter your skin color. We need to get out and be with each other more.
I didn't get to share positive experiences, but I'm born and raised in South Carolina, and one of my positive experiences was with the Millhouse family, who's a family that's now 5 generations deep into being police officers, right? And playing sports as a young man, like almost half of my coaches were police officers or firefighters or teachers or someone in some form of an authority type position, and that's what they did with their free time, is they went above and beyond to find different creative and innovative ways to be connected to the communities that they served. And as a result of that, right, whereas I also have multiple negative experiences with police officers, I also have so many positive experiences because of those connections and those relationships that exist. And so I don't know if it's us being able to hire more police officers so many of them don't have to work overtime, so that community service opportunities become more front and center and become more of a part of who they are and what they do and how they are intertwined into our community, and they build those relationships throughout multiple generations or not. But I think that at least as an example, could serve as a pretty decent pathway toward making sure community and law enforcement are connected, not only professionally, but like neighborly as well.
All right, we're going to go to the next question here.
Hello. This is mostly for Chief Hall, but anyone who has input is welcome to answer it. I grew up in a small Midwest community where 99% of the time the police genuinely had nothing better to do than harass people, and they seemed to relish in it. So as a young girl in that community, I was harassed quite often and threatened with arrest or threatened with being detained for quite literally just hanging out within eyesight of my home, trying to not wake my parents up at night, for little things like that. So how can someone like me who has those experiences, who has been trained by the police to not trust them, even though I have law enforcement in my family, how can someone like me see and trust that accountability is happening or that things are changing, especially when I continue to see examples of a lack of accountability, like when I won't name names, but our new resource officer was engaged in some shenanigans earlier this year, and we were told that that would be addressed at our upcoming neighborhood council meeting, and that went ignored. And then the next, I don't remember if it's been 1 or 2 meetings, but the next meeting, the person who was supposed to address it wasn't even there to address it. So now it's been a few months and we've heard nothing about this person who is supposed to be our resource officer, someone we're supposed to go to when we have problems, and the incident they were involved in hasn't been addressed at all to those of us who are directly impacted. How are we supposed to see that and say, yeah, there's accountability happening, when we're seeing direct evidence of no accountability?
Somebody else want to take this? No? I'm aware of the incident you're talking about, obviously. And it's a balance for me to have people who take police action that comes under criticism sort of forced into these sort of interactions with communities that or groups that may or may not be hostile to them. But quite frankly, it's a part of the job. And in order for us to be accountable, we have to do things like, sit up here and have candid conversations with the community. It is my understanding that officer will be at the next neighborhood meeting. Hopefully that conversation can occur. But going to what you started with, and I'll go back to what I started with at the very beginning of this, is don't give up. We just have to keep moving forward and trying with an open mind to make the changes that we want to make in our community, with our policing, with our electeds, with the laws that are being passed. If you give up, nothing's going to happen. Nothing. And it's one of the things I value about Bart is he's my quality control. He tells me, he'll call me up and say, this isn't what you want to do, and I appreciate that. I need that perspective. So one of the things that I really strongly impress upon my leadership team, and hopefully it's trickling down, is having an open mind, being intellectually humble, understanding that we don't know everything. And once again, it's going back to that partnership. We need to learn from each other, and maybe what we think we should be doing, maybe what we think is good policing, maybe isn't, and it's not what the community wants. And our legitimacy is directly tied to the community and how we police the community. So it's a big ship to turn around, and it's not going to turn around fast. I don't think I answered your question completely, but I will say don't give up.
All right, thank you for that. We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to come over here.
Thank you so much. I've learned a lot in this meeting, and I think we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. My question to Chief Hall is, already I've seen a difference in the city due to your leadership, and I have 2 nuts and bolts questions for you. First, what is your understanding of where the federal consent decree that was put into place on the city of Spokane after the murder of Otto Zem, where are we on that federal decree? And number two, what's your understanding of the ICE activity and the Border Patrol activity within the city of Spokane?
So in regards to the negotiated settlement agreement, it's my understanding that was successfully resolved years ago. I have done a little bit of research on that, and I did a lot of research on that before I came here. I think I've said it more than once. I don't really want a fixer-upper, so I wasn't looking to go to a city that had a consent decree. And I think, well, I don't think, I know the police department has come a long way since that time. Doesn't mean we've peaked. We still have a long way to go. It's the constant improvement that I was just talking about. We need to continue to learn from everything we've done and move forward. And regardless of what the Department of Justice is saying and doing now about consent decrees, we're going to continue to operate in a fashion as if that's going to continue. So we're going to be continuing to use data-driven, evidence-based decision-making to ensure that we're providing the best possible service to our community. And we don't need the Department of Justice to come in here and tell us how to do that. We have a community to tell us how to do that. As far as ICE, I have zero connection to ICE. I have yet to meet anybody from Homeland Security or ICE. They operate completely independent of the Spokane Police Department and quite frankly, the County Sheriff's Department. Keep Washington Working Act, we're very well aware of that. The officers are very well aware that they are criminally and civilly liable for interacting or engaging with ICE. That's a state law. And so we really have zero contact with Homeland Security or any of the federal agents who are engaged in immigration enforcement.
So we're going to do about 2 more questions. Now, those of you who wrote questions that we're not going to be able to get to, don't worry. We're going to try to make sure we store those questions and get those answered for you. So we're going to go over to Deb Conklin.
Thanks, Luke. So this question is primarily for Chief Hall, but I'd also like at least one of the other panelists to address it. I want to push back on what got said early on about police, when they answer a call, they have this fear and they get scared and that causes problems. I want to push back on that because when I was on the OPOC in our training, what we learned was when they get a call, the first thing they need to do is think about what the danger is and what can go wrong so they can get ready for it. Because if they're not ready for it, they react in ways that are not helpful. But if they can think about what might go wrong and what they could do to respond rather than react, they get better outcomes. So I realize this is a very nuanced place to try to go, that we don't want people to be afraid of someone because they're an other, but we also need them to have an appropriate appreciation for the danger that could be around that corner and figure out how they're going to plan to respond rather than wait for something to happen and react. And my question is that too nuanced? Can we not get there? Or is that a realistic hope? Or am I just flat out wrong?
Lisa didn't want to tackle that one. You're not wrong. And to your point, the officers are trained in that fashion, but they're also trained, and quite frankly, from experience, they know that what they're hearing through the radio and what's in the call text, oftentimes, as much as 50% of the time, is not accurate. So they're always going in not exactly knowing what they're going into because they know that the information is generally inaccurate or just not exactly what's going on. So they do start formulating plans. They do start discussing what their resources are based on the limited information and many times that they have. They want to know about weapons, history of people at the location, if there are any vehicles involved, things so that they can develop this plan and allocate the appropriate resources. The officers do an excellent job of that. And I'm going to use this opportunity. I've been sitting here thinking about this, and this is no criticism of what Jim said. I understand what he was, the point he was trying to make. But the 4 officers who got the Medal of Valor last week, they did not get it for shooting somebody. They got it for probably one of the most courageous acts I've ever seen in 33 years. And that's going in to rescue a woman who was shot by her partner multiple times. The partner was still in the apartment, who then fired at the officers, who they then shot that individual, while at the same time saving another individual who had barricaded in the bedroom of that same house. They got the award for that, going into a situation where they realistically thought they were going to get shot while trying to save a woman who was bleeding to death. Luckily, she was saved. The individual in the apartment was saved, and unfortunately, it ended in a shooting. So that's an example of a hasty plan by very professional officers doing one of the most courageous things I've ever seen.
Okay, we're gonna finish off here with this last question.
Well, I'm glad we're doing this because I have some background for this question. So in 2023, I think this relates to the third question on there about the administration. Sorry, not 2023. In February, President Trump rescinded or removed the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database, which helps track officers who have misconduct from going to different agencies, kind of what they call the wandering officer problem. So I have a couple questions. There's 2 parts. Have any of you seen this impact your work here in Spokane? And I'm also curious what Spokane is doing to make sure that we aren't hiring officers that have a history of misconduct at other agencies.
So one of the things that has happened throughout many decades here is that this department frequently hires lateral officers. Lateral officers are these officers that come from other departments. And when they come from other departments, they sometimes come with baggage with them. And so a lot of our department is based off these lateral hires, which gives us a problem both with training, the kind of training that those officers have received in their past, as well as the aspect of when they come here, their salary is at such a level, it's not like a new recruit where that salary level is down. And so once we acquire them, we get them at their, if they were on the force for 5 years, they're at that 5-year salary range. Well, one of the issues that we have in Spokane is the police contract says every year our officers get a 5% raise. And so having so many officers that are lateral officers that have this high-end salary is going to be a poison pill for the administration, the city administration. And so as far as how we go forward, one of the things that we really need to address is the hiring processes and the transparency around these lateral hires. When we do get these lateral hires, that could be great candidates. The public also needs to be informed on what they have done in their past. And I will say in some instances, departments don't actually look at what officers have done in their past because departments are so eager to get these lateral hires. And so the change needs to take place on starting to get these officers from the academy, fresh out of the academy, and let us mold and craft them from beginning, because otherwise we have the situation where they have so many different trainings that they've had throughout their lives, they don't know what training is appropriate. And I believe in one of Bart's last special reports, it identified that an officer, use force that was inappropriate for our community because they had remembered that training from their time in LAPD. And so the fact that other departments and how they train is affecting us.
I appreciate that, Anwar. And, and I just want to be real mindful, too, that we are approaching the end. We started a little bit late, so we're just going to go a few minutes over. And there have been some incredible things that have been brought up here. And fortunately, we've had the presence of mind to record this thing, and then it's being worked on in the back, and there'll be a video released. And and so again, just naming this is the beginning of the conversation. And so we'll be able to take not only your questions that haven't been answered, but also some extra nuance to the answers that we're given, and how do we actually march those important pieces forward and build and grow around the things that we collectively come together and understand need to be done. What does that look like, and this being the building block for that happening? So what I'm going to do now, panel, is I'm going to bring you to a rapid fire round. We're going to pass the mic all the way over to the end. And we're going to give you, just as brief as you possibly can, whatever burning desire, closing thought, whatever statement that you want to make on our way out the door, knowing, again, that this conversation is now going to be ongoing. And Mr. Peace, if you would, when it gets to you, please talk about how this conversation is going to continue.
Rapid fire, huh?
Yep,
okay.
Go, man.
So, I think the key with police reform, police accountability, is you have to believe that you can make a difference. That if you really think that change is possible, you can put all your efforts and your motivation behind that. Sometimes we can't just rage against the machine. The machine is there, it can be challenging, but man, we can really make a difference. And every time I come to one of these things and I hear the community speak, I hear ideas that should be free-flowing to the police department all the time, and my office as well. We need your ideas. I need you at the Police Ombudsman Commission meetings. We need to hear the things that are important to you, because you got some good ideas. And I think the more interaction we have between the community and the police department about what's acceptable and what is absolutely not acceptable is very, very important. The wandering officer question, that's really, really important, because all those officers still go through this background check. So the police chief, who has the final hiring authority on there, has that information. So if we have somebody that we find out is a wandering officer, that chief knew that in advance. So we need to let the chief know the officers that we want working in our community as well. And I think that's really, really important. And we still have that database in Washington, by the way. We don't have it from out of state. Yeah. But thank you. Your presence here alone right now gives us hope that we're all working on this together. And I just appreciate seeing y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
It says in one of our founding documents, it says, "We the people." So it says, "We the people." It doesn't say "we the police department," doesn't say "we the mayor." Somebody needs to tell them. It doesn't say "I the president." It says "we the people." And from my viewpoint, we the people, we can do better. We the people, we must do better. We the people, we have to convince ourselves we will do better. We the people.
I think one of the things that we need to look at is definitely when we do see something happen with law enforcement that needs to be corrected, we need to speak out about it. We need to make those corrections, and it needs to be public. When there's actions by police officers that are negative, such as we had a deputy recently that used excessive force against an elderly man sleeping in a park. The sheriff's department didn't even address it until it got brought to him by the attorney. A lot of the other officers covered for it. We need to address these issues publicly. When we have an officer who is going in to rescue somebody, but they shoot the person they're supposed to be rescuing in the leg, we need to address that publicly. When we have people who have been shot that have been unarmed and haven't committed a crime, we need to address that publicly. We need to acknowledge it, not just celebrate the good things law enforcement do. And I think we should do that. We should celebrate the good things law enforcement do. I do appreciate you. But we also need to be addressing the negative things openly, and we need to find solutions for them.
Jim.
My role in this is, for the past 25 years, I've been a police accountability expert. And so I've been working with impacted families closely, families like Jim and families that are in the audience right now. My main goal is to create a safer community for both sides of the badge, so both sides of the badge can go home at night. There are solutions out there for this, and I would just want to give kudos to SCAR for their platform for change. It is a document that talks about how to reform and go forward with police accountability, and a lot of folks on the stage actually help craft that document. So I would encourage folks to go to SCAR's website, Platform for Change, to check that out. Also, I would also encourage you all, this gentleman at the end, he doesn't work enough. He needs more complaints. If you see officers doing wrong and you think that there might be misconduct or questionable behavior, please don't hesitate to contact this man's office. Make him work, please. The interesting aspect of his job is Bart's office gets more internal complaints than citizens' complaints. We need to turn that around. It is great that officers are doing that, but we also, as the community, need to reach out. And lastly, if you find that this kind of conversation is helpful, I, in my role as a Human Rights Commissioner, want to let the community know that we will be hosting more of these kind of conversations dealing with public safety throughout the summer, so please stay tuned for that. And hopefully Chief Hall will be a part of that as well. But the main thing is get involved, as well as start loving one another. We as a community love each other. We need to start showing it.
Thank you, Anwar.
I'll be really brief because Anwar basically said what I believe is we want a safe community, safe for everybody, and that's at its very core what we're trying to do here is make it safe for everybody. The officers, the community, everybody who lives, travels, works here. The other thing I think is important to point out and is that really good police work happens in silence. You never hear about it. You never see the good work. I get to see it. My leadership team gets to see it all the time. What you get to see is mostly mistakes, misconduct, or just poor decision making, and it eclipses all of the good work that's happening out there every day. So I would just once again remind you to keep in mind the vast majority of the officers are doing really good work. They're trying really hard, and they almost to every single person, man and woman on my police department, joined the police so that they could help the community. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Chief.
First, I would just like to say thank you to all of you for coming today and sharing your thoughts and your expertise and your different subject matter. But the name of this program is Challenging the Narrative. And when you challenge the narrative, you challenge the narrator. And so with that, we are challenging not only the law enforcement, but we also have to challenge the community and be realistic with what we're doing as a community. Are we involved? And I think that's been a huge kind of topic that we've heard today is the involvement. But are we looking out for each other in community? Because a lot of times it takes that. When we have all this mistrust for the law enforcement, but we don't trust each other, and we're supposed to be a community. So I think that we need to also challenge the narrator, and that is the people. And we need to show up, not just to have accountability for the law enforcement, but for ourselves as well. So that's all I have to say, but I really want us to really think and go away with how we can be better stewards of our community and how we can look out for one another.
Madam President, thank you.
I'll be the quickest.
Doubt it.
Just a couple quick things, seriously. I think it's easy to get involved. I think it's a whole nother challenge to stay involved, right? We heard it earlier, people get tired, they get worn out. And I think where we are as a society today plays a huge role in that, right? We're in such an instant gratification society today that we oftentimes forget that some of the largest and most impactful movements in our country's history happened over years and decades and generations and were led by people who knew that they were not going to see the finished product themselves, but that they were fighting for a better world for tomorrow. And I think we've gone away from that, right? That we might knock against the wall a couple times, get worn out because nothing's changed immediately in that moment, or that you at least didn't get to feel it yet, and you get tired and weary of that. And so I think getting involved, we see it all the time. We see people get involved all the time. We meet new people that are newly involved and want to get active all the time. And then that excitement and that joy leaves very, very quickly, right? And I think we need to preface these conversations sometimes with, there will be opportunities that arise where we'll get to feel immediate impact, and we'll get to do that good work immediately and get the benefit from that. But that a lot of the most meaningful stuff is long ranging, and it takes time, and that needle moves very, very slowly. Every marginalized person in this room should probably understand that from personal experience and get that. So, yeah.
Yeah, Brother Jarrell. And you know I was gonna come to you, man. So I see you. You're up, man. Luke. Oh. Well, yeah, and I wanted to, before I kick it back to you, I wanted to give you an opportunity. Please let us know what you think. What are some burning things that you have, that you feel, that you think about tonight? And
well, so I will say, for those of you who don't know, my day job is for the governor's office doing external relations for Eastern Washington. And so I get to see, all these individuals, along with, I think I own like 4 businesses with Jarrell. So I think I see all of them in multifaceted ways on a regular basis. And I just really appreciate you all and just what y'all do for the community, and the fact that you came here. I don't know if Curtis shared the questions with y'all before this. Oh, he did? Okay, just saying. You don't read them? Yeah, it's a long email. But just the fact, especially for you, Chief Hall, to come out here and have these conversations, that gives me hope, right? Because, quite frankly, we didn't see that before. So the other thing is, you as a crowd, y'all stay here. We're at the end. You stayed here to the end. So I want to definitely give it up to all of you. And I see a lot of you staying involved as well. So like Jarrell was saying, it's easy, right, to just kind of get a burst of excitement, right, if something happens, and try to make change, and we see it a lot, like Jarrell saying, people get fizzled out, but I've seen a lot of you stay consistent, and that means a lot. So thank you for being there. Thank you for staying through this whole night, and I'll kick it back to Curtis.
All right, and I want to just go ahead and take a minute. I want to thank Brother Luke Jasmine for coming up here and sharing the stage with us and helping co-facilitate this. Let's give him a hand. And let's just go down the row. Brother Jarrell Haynes, Sister Lisa Gardner. Come on, clap it up. Let's give him some love. Chief Hall, Anwar Peace, Jim Lady, Pastor Kendricks. And did you know that Bart Logue came in here with like an ear infection. So you want to talk about dedication to sitting here, to not only this work, but to this conversation, as well as you all, as Luke was just pointing out, you all staying in and staying engaged the entire time, paying attention and stuff. This man came up here with something that's really been, I mean, you know, I'm kind of challenged with some sympathy because he caught it in the Caribbean, right? So he kind of, well, you know, but it's like, okay. So, but just so you know, that's the kind of dedication and the kind of people that we're all dealing with that, you know, that are dedicated to this work and are calling out to you to help join us in implementing, understanding, and moving to a different place that where we've been for more than a minute. How do we go even further than where we are today? Conversations like this. Oh yeah, let's give them all a hand. Give the panel a hand, please. Okay. I'm Curtis Robinson, and I am going to just go ahead and say we'll call it a thing. If you want to go ahead and throw up the last slide, ways to stay engaged and stay focused. This will be on the release, but the Spokane NAACP, missing and murdered Indigenous women, that's a crisis. You do understand that that's a crisis happening today. The Washington Coalition for Police Accountability, SCAR.org, the SpokaneCity.org, the police department, my Spokane City, the commissioner, Human Rights Commission, the Spokane Commission, Ombudsman Commission, the Criminal Justice Training Commission, and then once again, let's give it up. So again, we have another group that's been in here the entire time, the Office of Independent Investigations, who just stopped everything and came into this conversation. All right, and Lynn, lastly, but of course not leastly, I want to thank each and every one of you, as Luke already did. I'm just going to reaffirm that again. Thank each and every one of you for your time, your dedication, your voice, your willingness to come in here, sit down, have this conversation, but also I can see it in your eyes, your desire to try to figure out a way to move forward better than the way that we've been doing it. So please give yourselves all a hand, and on behalf of the NAACP, yeah, give yourselves a hand. Yep. On behalf of the NAACP and the Spokane Human Rights Commission, thank you, and that ends this session of Challenging the Narrative, but stay tuned because Commissioner Peace was talking about the continuing conversations on having a courageous talk. So courageous conversations, look forward, join us.
Yeah.
This is Challenging the Narrative, a series that takes a hard look at some of the prevailing mindsets surrounding issues that impact our people of color in Spokane. We examine the facts and the stories behind what has occurred and what needs to be done to shift the narrative in our local community, evolving around civil rights and social justice. Journey with us, talk with us, change with us as we challenge the narratives.